Down. Here's what we thought of Game 7. All right, and so with Jalen Rose and Stephen A., completely one-sided second half, and the Celtics go on to the Eastern Conference Finals. What was your number one takeaway, Stephen A.?
Actually, three. Sorry, I can't give you one. This performance likely cost Doc Rivers his job in Philadelphia. I say that. I don't wish it. I don't want it. I don't think he deserves it, but I think that will happen. Number two, it might cost Daryl Morey his job, especially if he thinks about giving James Harden a long-term deal. And number three, James Harden was so awful, so bad, he should actually shave his beard so he could hide his identity. That's how bad he was. I mean, it was really, really bad. I say that in all seriousness. I'm not joking. I worked in Philadelphia for 17 years. It was that bad. I'm telling you right now, it would be difficult for him to walk the streets. You don't do what you saw him do on Sunday afternoon in a Game 7.
And the idea of his going to Houston, which has been bandied about?
Slim to none. Yeah, listen, first of all, they ain't giving him no max deal. They ain't giving him a major long-term deal. If he went there, it would be for 2 years at best. I can assure you, this performance right here turned a whole bunch of people off about James Harden.
How about this process that you and I never liked? You get Joel Embiid as the third pick. Actually, you were lucky because he was injured and he fell to you. But, Stephen A., let me remind you what they did since then. They drafted Jahlil Okafor. Then they drafted Ben Simmons, number one. They traded up to number one to draft Markelle Fultz over Jason Tatum, who just knocked them out of the playoffs. Oh, speaking of getting knocked out of the playoffs, then they play against Mikal Bridges in this year's playoffs.
Yes.
They drafted him. Hometown kid, mom worked for the team. They traded him. How about the next year? After Kawhi makes the shot, Stephen A., they lose Jimmy Butler.
Yes.
He was on their team. They lost Jimmy Butler.
They'd have been in the finals one of these.
And last but certainly not least, to your point about Harden, who they parlayed from, at the time when you need your future Hall of Famer to show up the most, it seems to be the time when he always comes up the shortest.
And you know how bad he had to be because Embiid, the reigning league MVP, was bad. And we didn't even mention him. That's how bad James Harden was. I'm talking about bouncing the ball off your foot. I'm talking about just losing the ball. I'm talking about throwing the ball into the stands. I'm talking about that. I'm talking about epically bad. We say nothing like that. James Harden, we know that he's great. He wasn't great today on the biggest stage, came into the game 4 games this series. He's had 4 field goals or less in the game. It was very bad for James Harden. This is a career-defining bad.
Well, so the questions about his postseason performance continue. Jason Tatum was the one on this day with all the answers. That was us yesterday. Back here again now on Get Up this morning with a game of fact or fiction. Let's go for more answers. So, Alan, if I said James Harden and Joel Embiid will never win together, would that be fact or fiction?
That will be fact. And, boy, Stephen A., bringing it there. Shave the beard and everything else. But maybe the question about this is not necessarily is James Harden good enough, is he the right fit with Joel Embiid? That, to me, is the question.
Vince Carter, next. Will there be a bubble rematch in the finals? Are we looking at Heat Lakers in the NBA championship? Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Fiction.
I do think the Denver Nuggets are loaded and playing their best basketball right along with the Boston Celtics.
So he doesn't like either one of those two teams. Alan, let's go back to the Lakers. If I said LeBron and the Lakers now face their hardest test yet against Jokic and the Nuggets, is that fact or fiction?
Yeah, that's a fact because Denver really has mowed through the playoffs first and foremost. Second of all, they have one of the great players in the league who's a very difficult guard. Jamal Murray's healthy, and when he's healthy, we know he's a great scorer. They've got a deep bench, they've got a head coach, and they've got a core. You talk about process, this team has been...
They get less attention per win than any other team in the league. I'm not sure what ratio I was looking for there. But look, the reality is the Nuggets are a franchise that doesn't have all the storied history that so many of the others do. And Jokic doesn't play the kind of game that is artistically pleasing to watch. The reality is he's just ridiculously effective. And so we talked earlier, and again, Woj made the point with us that between Darvin Ham and Rob Pelinka, those two guys deserve enormous credit for the Lakers going from where they were to where they are. But this next step will be a doozy. So I'm asking you first, Vince Carter, how do the Lakers win this series? If we're sitting here in 2 weeks and we're talking about LeBron back in the finals, how will we be saying he did it?
Anthony Davis winning his matchup, because I think if he wins his matchup, everything else opens up because he's going to, one, have to do it on the offensive end, but he's going to have to do it on the defensive end. He's going to have to score points as well as defend and not shut him down, but contain. You know, whatever Jokic is averaging, he can't hit his averages. You know, that's just the reality. Oh, and he has to stay healthy.
Yeah. Our buddy Dan Patrick always says, you can't stop him, you can only hope to contain him. And I don't even know what containing Jokic would actually mean.
Not a triple-double?
Not a triple-double.
Average a triple-double in the series?
We'll know it when we see it, I suppose. How about it? How
I agree with VC. I mean, I think LeBron is going to be LeBron. I think LeBron will give you a LeBron performance like we saw in Game 6, and we expect he's always going to give you that one performance in the series. You'll get something out of the reserves. They have proven at this point. This is no longer a time to look at the Lakers and think, oh, they don't have a lot of experience in their reserve. No, they've proven already in this run that everybody has an opportunity to step up. Anthony Davis, the durability and his ability really not necessarily on the offensive end. We know he'll get there. It's what does he have left in the tank after having to battle and bang with Nikola Jokic for the majority of the game. He's going to have to be the one. There is no Dwight Howard. There is no JaVale McGee. Right. There's no one else that you can spell him minutes like they did in the bubble to continue.
I mean, they do have Mo Bamba, but they just he didn't even put a uniform on yet. I think
Obama might be 100 pounds lighter than
they're going to need him just to spare him some time because if Anthony Davis gets in foul trouble, what happens to the Lakers?
Understood. Well, what happens if all of a sudden we're looking at Mo Bamba matched up against Nikola Jokic? I don't want to think about what happens to the Lakers. But let me bring Woj into the conversation on this front. We all understand what we're looking at here, Woj, with a West Conference final that begins tomorrow night. The game's on ESPN and ABC. What are the things that you have in your mind as we prepare for our coverage of the series?
Green, I want to disagree with you on something you said about the Nuggets, that they're not aesthetically pleasing to watch, that Jokic isn't. You know, this feels like how people talked about the Spurs at the height of their dynasty, when I thought that was a team that was incredibly aesthetically pleasing, the way they played. And listen, Tim Duncan and Nikola Jokic are different players, certainly, but you hear a lot of the same things about Duncan then that you do with Jokic now. They are an incredible team to watch play basketball. Jokic's passing ability, he's revolutionized the center position in this league, really playing a point center. And when Michael Malone in Denver really put the ball in his hands, he passes in a way that very few bigs ever have. He may be as good of a passing big man as we've seen, and it's been contagious with how unselfish this Denver team is. I am mesmerized watching Nikola Jokic play basketball, and I think people who are going to lock in now on potentially a 5 or 6 or a 7-game series with the Lakers and Nuggets, I think they're going to feel the same way. I bet Allen and Vince love watching that team play. Those are two basketball aficionados, and I just think, listen, when Jokic is on, you can't take your eyes off of him.
I think that's fair. Maybe I should have put it in a different way. By aesthetically pleasing, I mean, I liked watching Vince Carter fly through the air and slow dunks.
What we showed in that highlight package was layups. Vince was throwing it down. Now, the Spurs comparison is great because you know what? I think the biggest star for the Denver that nobody talks about is Mike Malone.
Yeah.
I mean, and just like Pop was just the guy you were drawn to. He had great comments, post-game comments. the nation will really get to know Mike Malone, who's been a basketball lifer. His father obviously was a great coach. And Mike Malone, exactly, you know who I'm talking about. This guy, and he bled through the early years with this group. So there's one guy that we'll get to know.
Let's see what they're able to do. Let's put the pick bars up on the screen. We have all made our picks on this series, and let's see. This
sweep.
Well, this just guarantees the Lakers are going to win. I mean, if there's one thing that I've come to learn over the many years is that whenever we all have the same logo up on the screen, we're never all right.
Kiss of death.
So we'll see what winds up happening. That is the true hashtag.